Hotel staff mocked a well-dressed black man's southern accent, thinking he was just another guest they could humiliate. What they didn't know, he was the new regional director, secretly evaluating their service. Within minutes, their smirks vanished, and their jobs were gone. What happened next stunned the entire hotel chain. Watch until the end to see how one man's quiet strength sparked a powerful change. The golden chandeliers of the Hôtel de Lumière glittered above the marble lobby, casting a warm glow over the plush velvet furniture and the impeccably dressed staff. Nestled in the heart of Paris, just a stone's throw from the Champs-Élysées, the hotel was a beacon of opulence, a playground for the elite. On this crisp March evening in 2025, the air buzzed with the usual hum of wealthy guests. European aristocrats, American tech moguls, and the occasional celebrity hiding behind oversized sunglasses. But tonight, something different was about to unfold. Malik Jackson stepped through the revolving doors, his polished leather shoes clicking softly against the floor. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of rich espresso and a tailored charcoal suit that hugged his frame perfectly. A faint smile played on his lips as he adjusted his cufflinks, the silver glinting under the lights. He carried a single leather briefcase. No luggage, no entourage. To the untrained eye, he was just another well-dressed traveler. But to the staff at the front desk, he was something else entirely. Bonsoir, monsieur. The concierge, a wiry man named Pierre with a pencil-thin mustache, greeted him with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. How may we assist you tonight? Malik's voice came out smooth, deep, and unmistakably southern. Georgia, to be exact. Evening? I'd like to check in. Reservations under Jackson. Pierre's smile faltered for a split second, his brow twitching as he processed the accent. He glanced at his colleague, Sophie, a blonde woman with a sharp jawline and a smirk already forming. She leaned over the counter, tapping her manicured nails on the marble. Jackson, you say? Sophie replied, her tone dripping with condescension. Let me just check that for you. She made a show of typing slowly into the system, her eyes flicking up to study Malik. You're not one of those American tourists who thinks this is a budget motel, are you? We're quite exclusive here. Malik tilted his head, his smile unwavering. I reckon I'm in the right place. Y'all got my name there? Pierre chuckled under his breath, exchanging a look with Sophie. Oh, we've got a lot of names, monsieur, but I'm not sure yours fits the profile. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. You see, this is the Hôtel de Lumière. Not everyone can just waltz in off the street. The lobby was quiet enough that their words carried, drawing a few curious glances from nearby guests. A middle-aged woman in a fur coat raised an eyebrow, while a man in a tuxedo pretended not to listen. Malik set his briefcase down gently, resting one hand on it. That's so, he said, his drawl thickening just enough to make them squirm. Well, I'd hate to trouble y'all. Just check the system one more time if you don't mind. Sophie rolled her eyes, her smirk widening. Fine. Let's humor him, Pierre. She typed again, slower this time, then froze. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as the screen flickered. Pierre leaned over, his smug expression fading as he read the details. The reservation wasn't just there. It was flagged with a priority code, one reserved for VIPs and corporate brass. But before they could process it, Sophie snapped, Oh, please, this must be a glitch. You, a priority guest? Where's your private jet, then? Malik didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black card, matte, unembossed, with only a faint logo in the corner. the logo of Lumière International, the parent company of the hotel chain. He slid it across the counter. "This'll do, I suppose." Pierre's face drained of color. Sophie's smirk vanished. The card wasn't a credit card. It was an executive access pass, one they'd only seen in training manuals. "Monsieur, Pierre stammered, but Malik raised a hand to stop him. "No need to fuss," Malik said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "I'm just here to see how things run. Name's Malik Jackson, regional director, effective last week. Thought I'd drop by unannounced, get a feel for the place." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "And I gotta say, y'all are making one hell of a first impression." The lobby seemed to shrink around them. Sophie's hands trembled as she clutched the counter, and Pierre's mustache quivered like a trapped mouse. They'd mocked him, dismissed him, all because of his skin and his accent, assumptions they'd made 1,000 times before with no consequence. But this time, they'd misjudged the wrong man. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Malik Jackson stood there, his black card still resting on the counter like a guillotine blade waiting to fall. Pierre's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Sophie, for all her earlier bravado, looked like she might faint, her perfectly painted nails digging into the marble as if it could anchor her. The handful of guests lingering nearby had stopped pretending not to watch. Some whispered. Others craned their necks, sensing a spectacle unfolding. Malik picked up his briefcase and tapped it lightly against his leg. "Now, I ain't one for making a scene," he said, his southern drawl cutting through the tension like a slow rolling thunder. "But I reckon we got some things to sort out. Where's your manager?" Pierre fumbled with the phone, nearly dropping it as he dialed the back office. "Madame le clerk will be right out, monsieur, sir," he stammered, his French accent thickening with panic. Sophie shot him a glare, as if he'd betrayed her by breaking first, but she didn't dare speak. Not yet. A moment later, the double doors behind the desk swung open, and Madame Leclerc emerged. She was a severe woman in her 50s, her graying hair pulled into a tight chignon, her navy blazer crisp and authoritative. She carried herself like a general marching into battle, but the flicker of unease in her eyes betrayed her. She'd clearly been briefed, however hastily, by Pierre's garbled call. "Monsieur Jackson," she said, her voice smooth but strained. "What an unexpected pleasure. I apologize for any misunderstanding at the desk. Please, allow me to personally escort you to the presidential suite." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Appreciate the offer, Madame Leclerc, but I ain't here for a vacation. I'm here to work. And from what I just saw, we got a lot of work to do." He gestured toward Pierre and Sophie, who shrank under his gaze. These two thought I was some lost tourist they could shoo away. Made it real clear I didn't belong, on account of how I talk, or maybe how I look. You tell me. Madame Leclerc's lips tightened into a thin line. "I assure you, this is not how we conduct ourselves at Hôtel de Lumière. I'll handle this immediately." "See, that's the thing," Malik interrupted, stepping closer. "I don't think this is a one-off. I've been with Lumière International long enough to know what's what. Complaints come across my desk. Guests treated like dirt because they don't fit the mold. Folks like me. Folks with accents. Folks who ain't white or rich enough for your exclusive standards. And I'm betting it starts right here with folks like them." He nodded at the desk. "So let's not pretend this is news to you." The manager's composure cracked, just for a second. She glanced at Pierre and Sophie, then back at Malik. "Monsieur, Call me Malik," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "And let's cut the formalities. I want a meeting, now. You, your staff, everyone on shift. Conference room, 10 minutes. We're gonna have a little chat about how this place runs." Madame Leclerc hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Of course, Malik. I'll arrange it." As she turned to bark orders at a nearby bellhop, Malik leaned against the counter, his eyes locking onto Pierre and Sophie. "Y'all might want to start thinking about what you're gonna say, 'cause I'm listening." 10 minutes later, the conference room was packed. Waiters, housekeepers, valets, and front desk staff squeezed around a long oak table, their faces a mix of confusion and dread. Madame Leclerc stood at the head, her arms crossed, while Malik paced slowly along the side, his briefcase now open on a chair. He'd pulled out a tablet and a stack of papers, reports, emails, guest feedback forms, the evidence of a pattern. "All right, y'all," he began, his voice steady but commanding. "I'm Malik Jackson, your new regional director. I came here tonight to see what I'm working with. And what I saw out there?" He pointed toward the lobby. "That ain't it. Two of your own thought they could judge me, mock me, 'cause I don't sound like y'all, don't look like the usual clientele. They figured I was nobody. Thing is, I'm somebody. And so's every guest who walks through those doors." He tapped the tablet, pulling up a guest complaint from 3 months prior. January 12th. Black couple from London said they were ignored at the bar for 20 minutes while white guests got served. February 3rd. Indian family told their kids were too loud when they weren't. March 1st. Latino businessman asked to show ID 3 times before check-in. Y'all seeing a trend here? The room was silent. A housekeeper in the back shifted uncomfortably, her eyes on the floor. Pierre stared at his hands, and Sophie's face burned red, though whether from shame or defiance, Malik couldn't tell. "This stops tonight," he said. "Not just 'cause I'm here, but 'cause it's right. Y'all work in hospitality. Means you welcome folks, not tear 'em down. I'm giving you a chance to fix this. New training, new policies, new attitude. But if I hear one more story like mine, or these," he held up the papers, "you're out. No second chances." Madame Leclerc cleared her throat. "Monsieur, Malik, I agree, changes are needed. But some of these staff, they've been here for years. They're set in their ways." "Then they'll learn new ways," Malik shot back. "Or they'll find new jobs. Your call." The meeting stretched on, voices rising and falling as staff aired grievances, excuses, and slowly, ideas. Malik listened, jotting notes, his presence a quiet force that demanded accountability. By the end, Pierre had apologized, his voice shaking, and Sophie had stormed out, muttering about quitting. Madame Leclerc promised a full report by morning. As the room emptied, Malik stood alone, staring out the window at the Paris skyline, the Eiffel Tower aglow in the distance. He'd won a battle tonight, but the war wasn't over. Racism didn't vanish with one speech or one firing. It lingered, subtle and stubborn, in places like this all over the world. He'd changed the Hôtel de Lumière, sure. But what about the next hotel? The next city? He smiled faintly, picking up his briefcase. Tomorrow, he'd visit another property. Unannounced, of course. Let him keep guessing. The next morning, the Hôtel de Lumière buzzed with a different energy. The staff moved faster, their usual polished routines tinged with unease. Word of Malik Jackson's arrival, and the reckoning that followed, had spread like wildfire. By 8 a.m., Madame Leclerc had emailed him a detailed report, a list of proposed policy changes, a schedule for mandatory sensitivity training, and a formal apology from Pierre, who'd stayed up all night drafting it. Sophie, predictably, had resigned, leaving a curt note about unfair treatment that Malik read with a wry shake of his head. He didn't care. She'd made her bed. Malik sat in the hotel's rooftop cafe, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, the Paris skyline stretching out before him. The spring air was cool, the city waking up below, taxis honking, tourists snapping photos, life marching on. He'd swapped his suit for a crisp blazer and slacks, blending in just enough to watch the staff without drawing attention. His tablet lay open on the table, displaying a live feed of guest reviews from the past month. Most were glowing. 5 stars for the decor, the food, the views. But buried in the comments were the cracks. Staff seemed dismissive, felt judged at check-in, not as welcoming as expected. Small cuts, but they added up. A young waiter approached, a black man in his 20s with a nervous smile. "Monsieur Jackson? I just wanted to say thank you for last night. I've been here 6 months, and, well, I've seen things, heard things. Never thought anyone up top would care." Malik leaned back, studying him. "What's your name, son?" "Jean," the waiter replied, shifting his tray. "Jean Dubois." "Jean, huh? You from Paris?" "Born here, sir. Parents are from Senegal." Malik nodded, sipping his coffee. "You ever get the 'you don't belong' look from folks around here?" Jean hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes. Guests mostly. But a few co-workers too. They don't say it, but you feel it." "Yeah," Malik said softly. "I know that feeling. Listen, Jean, you see anything off, you tell me. I'm keeping my eyes open, and I need folks like you to do the same. We're fixing this place, one step at a time." Jean's smile widened, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Yes, sir, I will." As Jean walked away, Malik's phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Next stop, Milan. Hotel's been flagged for similar issues. Flights at 3 p.m. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Paris was just the beginning. Lumiere International had properties across Europe, London, Berlin, Barcelona, and he'd heard whispers of the same old story. Staff turning up their noses at guests who didn't fit the luxury mold. He'd climbed the ranks from a bellhop in Atlanta to regional director, and he'd seen it all. Every slight, every smirk, every door slammed in his face. Now he had the power to kick those doors down. By noon, the lobby was humming again. Malik stood near the front desk, watching as a new shift took over. Pierre was there, quieter now, his mustache drooping as he checked in a family from Nigeria with exaggerated politeness. Madame Leclerc hovered nearby, her eagle eyes scanning for slip-ups. Malik caught her gaze and gave a slight nod. She returned it, a silent pact. Things would change, or heads would roll. He stepped outside, the Paris sun warming his face. A group of American tourists brushed past, laughing loudly, oblivious to the storm he'd just unleashed inside. He thought about his mama back in Georgia, who'd worked double shifts cleaning hotel rooms to put him through school. She'd told him, "Folks'll try to box you in, Malik. Don't let 'em." He hadn't. And he wouldn't let this hotel or any other box anyone else in either. His driver pulled up, a sleek black sedan ready to whisk him to the airport. Malik slid into the back, his briefcase at his side, and glanced at the Hotel de Lumière one last time. It looked the same, grand, gleaming, untouchable. But he knew better. Change was brewing, slow and messy, the way it always was. He'd rooted out the rot here, planted seeds for something better. Whether they'd grow, though, that wasn't just up to him. It was up to Pierre, to Jean, to every guest who walked through those doors and demanded respect. As the car rolled toward Charles de Gaulle Airport, Malik opened his tablet again. A new email popped up, a complaint from the Milan property. Rude staff, felt racially profiled, it read. He smirked, cracking his knuckles. Looked like Milan was next in line for a surprise visit. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. Not in Paris, not anywhere. Racism didn't die. It hid, waiting for the next chance to rear its head. But Malik Jackson was ready. He'd keep showing up, keep tearing it down, one hotel at a time. And maybe, just maybe, the world would start paying attention.